Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hanan, for joining us. And good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Muhammad. I'm the executive director here at the Jerusalem Fund and Palestine Center. As always, we appreciate you being here, and thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I'd just like to ask you to please continue supporting us by watching our events like this. Tell your friends and family about us, and if you can, please donate to the Jerusalem Fund and Palestine Center so that we can continue to put on these events. We would greatly appreciate any support that you can give. It all makes a difference. Today, we are very happy to host and welcome back Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, who will be discussing her thoughts about the upcoming Palestinian elections, as well as other events that are currently going on in Palestine. It's also a pleasure to have with me here Saeed Arakat, who will be moderating this event. Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, for those of you who don't know, is a distinguished Palestinian leader, legislator, activist, and scholar who served as a member of the Leadership Committee and as an official spokesperson of the Palestinian delegation to the Middle East peace process, beginning with the Madrid Peace Conference of 1991. Making history as the first woman to hold a seat in the highest executive body in Palestine, she was elected as a member of the Executive Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, in 2009, and most recently in 2018. She resigned in 2020. In 1996, Dr. Ashrawi was appointed as the Palestinian Authority Minister of Higher Education and Research. She was elected to the Palestinian Legislative Council representing Jerusalem in 1996, and she was re-elected for the Third Way block ticket in 2006. As a civil society activist, she founded the Independent Commission for Human Rights in 1994, Miftah, the Palestinian Initiative for the Promotion of Global Dialogue and Democracy in 1991, and Aman, the National Coalition for Accountability and Integrity in 1999. She serves on the advisory and international boards of several global, regional, and local organizations, and she is the recipient of numerous awards from all over the world, including a distinguished French decoration, which I will not try to pronounce, and several academic accolades, including 11 honorary doctorates from universities in the US, Canada, Europe, and the Arab world. Saeed Arakat is a member of our Palestine Center Committee here, and he is the Washington Bureau Chief for the Palestinian newspaper Al-Quds, a daily for which he is a writer, columnist, and analyst. He previously served as spokesman and director of public information for the United Nations Assistance Mission for Iraq, and currently teaches as an adjunct professor at American University in Washington, DC. Thank you both for joining us and for being here with us today. At the end of the discussion, we will have a Q&A session. You can ask your questions on the YouTube chat feature, which is on the side of the live stream, or you can tweet your questions to @Palestine Center. Thank you all for joining us, the audience and our speaker and moderator. We really appreciate it. And I will pass it on now to Saeed.
Thank you, Dr. Hanan. It is such a great honor for me to have you and to have this conversation with you. You have been, probably the most visible Palestinian leader of all time. So I'm sure the Palestinian people appreciate that, and the world appreciate that. There's much to talk about, so we are going to get into it right away. And of course, I welcome you. And then I want to ask you about what is happening in Jerusalem. What happened? What sparked it? How it evolved? Where are we now? And what are the next steps?
Mm-hmm. What's happening in Jerusalem actually is first of all, it's a way of the Palestinian people in Jerusalem and the Palestinian youth in particular to respond to an escalating Israeli assault on the city in a variety of ways. But as you know, the Kahanas, the extremists, started with this march to Damascus Gate to Jerusalem a few days ago. and yelling and shouting that death to the Arabs, and trying to prevent the Palestinians in the old city from actually reaching Damascus Gate, which was blocked earlier with these metal railings by the Israeli security to prevent the Palestinians during Ramadan from doing their usual celebrations after iftar and prayer. This was a supreme provocation. Let me put it that way. We can talk about a whole series of incremental provocations, if you will. But since the beginning of Ramadan, the Israelis were trying to prevent any kind of expression, not just of religious expression, but also of social, cultural activities in the city, particularly places that are open and obvious. Israel, as you know, has been systematically trying to change the character of Jerusalem, has been trying to alter its culture, alter its appearance, and carry out what we call demographic engineering or ethnic cleansing in the city. So this is not just a sudden thing. This comes in the context of a concerted effort at turning Jerusalem into an Israeli exclusively Jewish city, with the declared aim of making it with a majority of, they said 70%, but of course they couldn't do it since they joined West and East Jerusalem, 70% Jewish, and changing even the names of streets, demolishing homes, evicting Palestinians from their homes, surrounding the city with settlements, with checkposts, with the wall, and extricating it from its Palestinian environs, context. So, and the Palestinians have been protesting all these things constantly. The problem is that Jerusalem is in a way isolated from its the rest of the West Bank, because Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza cannot enter the city of Jerusalem unless they have Jerusalem IDs, as you know. And so the Jerusalemites have been left to fend for themselves on their own, which is extremely dangerous. And it's in many ways, it's a battle that is ongoing. As you remember, 3-4 years ago, when they installed these electronic gates at the entrance, of Al-Aqsa, the Palestinians in Jerusalem again rebelled, and all religious and social and civil society organizations all rebelled all at once, and they clashed with the army, with the security forces, and they prevented these, and they forced Netanyahu to remove them.
Right.
And of course, the other, So that was one battle that was really major. That was one. Israel, in particular, is focusing on Al-Aqsa, Al-Haram al-Sharif, because they want, in many ways, to control who goes in, who goes out. They've been even sentencing people, preventing them from entering. That you are not allowed, even religious leaders are not allowed to enter Haram Sharif as a form of punishment. It's incredible, the draconian ways in which they are trying to control everything and isolate everything in Jerusalem and change, as I said, its character in every possible way. And this is the latest in a series. But it came in the context of Ramadan, of course, and it inflamed public opinion. And it's a clear way in which the Israelis are sending a message that we are going to forcibly transform the city to become purely Jewish. And of course, exclude any expression of Palestinian life, Muslim, Christian, whatever, but the identity of the city is at stake, in addition to its people, in addition to its territory and its freedom, of course.
Yeah. So what are the next few days, let's say, not let alone the next few months, how are they to evolve as far as this issue is concerned? I mean, do you expect that there will be more, brutality and restrictions by the Israelis? Will people be able to go down in the evening?
As you know, they removed the metal fences, barriers, yes. And the Palestinian, the young people felt that they won this battle again, that they forced the Israelis. And because, of course, every city, town, village in Palestine rebelled. There were confrontations and clashes all night, everywhere, in Jerusalem, around Jerusalem, in every city in the West Bank, all the way from Jenin north to in Gaza to Rafah in the south. So this was something that the spark that ignited a protest movement and sent a clear message that, hands off Jerusalem, as well as some, statements of concern and so on from Arab regimes, beginning with Jordan and others, even the UAE.
Yeah. Surprisingly. Yeah.
But before I forget, I did something that's very rude. I forgot to thank Muhammad for his introduction, for hosting us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Muhammad. I want to thank, of course, the Jerusalem Fund and the Palestine Center, where I've been a recurrent visitor for many years.
Right.
Hopefully, I will be able to come back and see you. Thank you for the invitation, and to thank you, Saeed.
Well, thank you. I'm thoroughly honored. I want to go back and ask you a couple of questions on Jerusalem. Although it is really heartening to see such displays of heroism by Jerusalemites, and they have always shown that. They have always been at the forefront and so on. So that's really, it's great. We take great pride in that and so on. But it's also sad because they seem to be alone, And I remember when, the right-wing administration of Donald Trump and David Friedman and Nikki Haley and Pompeo, where they were saying, look, nothing is going to happen. We will recognize Jerusalem. And they turned out to be right. Nothing really stirred. So Jerusalemites are alone. What can be done to basically recreate that connection?
Look, Jerusalemites aren't alone when it comes to the Palestinian people.
Right.
And everywhere else in Palestine. It's the heart of Palestine. But they are alone when it comes to the Arab and Islamic world and their organizations and leadership. Right. This is the problem. For years, we've been saying that, you have to support Jerusalem, you have to help the endurance, the resilience of the people of Jerusalem. You have to exercise your own influence, not just on Israel, but on the rest of the world, to know that, Jerusalem is not alone, that it is protected by this Arab and Islamic and Christian belt, and people of all good conscience, and people who are in solidarity with Palestine. And there are many now organizations, as you know. So unfortunately, this hasn't mobilized. I don't believe in any way you can say that Trump and his ilk and his whole crew, I don't want to even mention their names. I'm so glad I want to forget their names.
Right.
There was a very, very dark and horrible period. But that they kept saying we can do it and get away with it. The problem is they say nothing happened, but a lot happened. You know what happened?
Yeah.
The chances of peace were destroyed.
Yeah.
Any kind of negotiation has been destroyed.
Right. Yeah.
And the any kind of communication with the Palestinians stopped. And without the Palestinians, there can be no peace and no peace process. They're fond of processes. And that is no small feat. I mean, they did manage to destroy any possibility of contact, of negotiations, and they managed to disqualify themselves as so-called peace brokers, and to rule out. They tried every possible way, and we did not go either to Bahrain, to Manama, nor we did not accept the Trump plan, the so-called deal of the century, and so on. So in many ways, what they did was extremely destructive, and they formed an alliance of lawlessness outside international law. The US and Israel and the other autocrats and dictators in the world. Yeah. And in that sense, they really wreaked havoc in the region and beyond, not just in Palestine. But many Palestinians protested and demonstrated, as you know, all over. The day, I think, of the announcement, there were demonstrations and marches, there were scores of people wounded, there were tens killed. So it's not nothing. But at the same time, you cannot sustain with your own unarmed will the protest movement forever against the US and Israel when you are not being buttressed and supported by other forces, particularly governments that have always declared their allegiance to Jerusalem and to Palestine and to justice and peace and so on.
Yeah.
So it's extremely difficult. Yes, Jerusalem must on the whole have been alone. No, I believe that there should be a concerted effort by those who claim allegiance and dedication to Jerusalem and to the cause of Palestine and peace and justice. I think that they should exercise whatever influence they have. Again, the international community that claims that it wants to see a global rule of law, that it wants to see adherence to the principles of justice and a rules-based order and multilateralism and so on, they're the ones who should act as well. But Israel continues to get a free pass. And it was emboldened by Trump, certainly, but this is a pattern of behavior that it has been following with full impunity and in many cases support and getting rewards from the US, from Europe even.
There's a great deal to talk about, and we want to talk about, of course, the current issues like the elections and so on, and all that, the potential for them. But let me ask you before I go there. There was the Palestinian leadership was almost, like a day late and a dollar short, as we say in America, in responding to the Trump, and they created the great many facts on the ground. I mean, this, the phony name of the Abrahamic Accords, which is really nonsensical, phony name, the normalization, it gave them cover, and now the Biden administration will just carry on and so on. So why, for us, I mean, I could be wrong, but for us, the reaction from the Palestinian leadership was always lacking. It was not up to the level of the challenge. Why is that? And how could that be rectified, at least under the current administration in America?
You see, that's the problem, is that the Palestinian leadership is in a reactive mode all the time.
Right.
Not you said, why was there no reaction?
Yeah.
We should have been. I'm no longer in any official leadership position.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it took a lot of doing.
Right. We'll talk about that if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Go
we
ahead.
will later on.
Yeah.
But the thing is, no, to be fair, I was giving a talk in Bethlehem to the press and to the diplomatic corps, December 2017. Mm-hmm. And they announced
Jerusalem,
that,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Pence declared he was in Egypt and declared he's coming from Egypt to visit Israel and to visit not Palestine, the Palestinian leadership, the PA or whatever.
Right.
And I said, and during that briefing, I said, let him not bother. Nobody will deceive him. After recognizing that. So it was instantly this response. Right. But at the same time, it wasn't delayed in responding verbally. Now, how would you respond when the US declares an assault on you, when the US becomes a partner in crime with Israel? Right. What kind of defense would you do? I'm sure that they should have, or we should have taken further steps and so on. And to be fair, I think Palestine was the only country or power or whatever that said no to Trump. You've seen one state after another, one country after the other, buckling under when faced with Trump. Even the Europeans, look at everybody, in a sense, did not want to confront Trump. And we were told, we cannot confront Trump. We cannot fight this battle. People were saying, let's make nice. The Europeans were, the Arabs. I can't believe the only place where Trump was told no in no uncertain terms was Palestine.
Right, that is true.
Whether it's in the economic peace deal or whether it is in his so-called initiative or whatever, we refused to receive any of them. We boycotted the embassy. We called it a settlement in Jerusalem, and we still boycott it anyway. So in a sense, that was a position that was very clear, very decisive. But and there were demonstrations, there were protests and so on, but you cannot keep protesting every day the Trump move or Trump positions, given the fact that there were so many different issues that were every day confronting the Palestinians: house demolitions, extrajudicial killings, evictions. I mean, it was incredible. It is still now. Every day we are inundated, we are overwhelmed with all the instances of injustice that Israel can inflict on the Palestinian people without any accountability. And the Palestinians are like trying to field off and trying to protest and trying to prevent further damage. And it's extremely difficult because not only are we alone, but Israel has acquired a few allies.
Yeah.
And has really managed to fragment the Arab world. Yeah. And to destroy the Arab Peace Initiative, to render it just a piece of paper with no meaning, and has in many ways violated a series of agreements that the Arab League, or resolutions that the Arab League has adopted. And so it weakened and marginalized the Palestinians even further. But that was one of the most horrible periods, given the fact that we lost a great deal. Not just in terms of funding, the US defunded Palestine altogether, from the refugees to infrastructure to scholarships to everything ongoing. But also we were being punished in every possible way. There were no contacts, no talks. They were rewarding Israel and they were giving away our rights and our lands. They decided that this is not an occupation. They dropped the term occupation from their lexicon. They decided that the settlements are not illegal on the country. These are Jewish neighborhoods and the Jews have the full right to live wherever they want. I would like to see them, giving away Washington or the White House or whatever if they have the right to live wherever they want. Why give away Palestine only? And anyway, all these transformations, even to the point where that horrible ambassador, David Friedman, was seen with a sledgehammer, so.
He did. He literally had a sledgehammer breaking. Yes, exactly. Yeah,
and I said, this is
Greenblatt, yes.
A political and moral, in addition to a material sledgehammer, which he was digging under the Silwan. And of course,
remember that.
Silwan is of course, targeted in the same way as Sheikh Jarrah is targeted, in the same way as Aisawi is targeted. They're very busy carrying out, this ethnic cleansing and so on. So when the US becomes an active partner, literally, not just in the occupation, but in attempting to demolish everything that is Palestinian, and therefore demolish the chances of peace, then it becomes, a situation where you have to pull together all your resources to be able to remain, to be able to withstand all these assaults, while Israel was being handed all these rewards and all the privileges and preferential treatment from the Trump administration. Now with Biden, I'm not going to say we have a savior in the White House. No, and it's not enough to say that he will undo some of the things that Trump did. He will walk back on some issues. That's not enough, because Trump has created some facts, and unless they are immediately undone and removed, they will have a life of their own. They will create a situation which becomes difficult to undo altogether. And unless they really show the courage, this administration shows the courage not just to undo this, including the embassy in Jerusalem, the American embassy in Jerusalem, but also issues of looking at the Palestinians as people with equal rights, looking at the Palestinians as partners in a conversation, in a dialogue, in a strategic dialogue and a conversation, not looking at us only through the lens of what Israel wants or what's good for Israel, which is generally the habitual pattern of American behavior when it comes to Palestine. And not as the agents of Israel to see what concessions they can extract from the Palestinians on behalf of Israel, as they are doing now, picking up Israeli language and diction and slogans and telling us we need to stop incitement, as if we're the ones inciting, and change your textbooks, or things having to do with the prisoners, and you cannot fund the prisoners' families and so on. So without even thinking, mindlessly, this whole-scale adoption of the Israeli language and Israeli even propaganda, because if you look at these things, they were agreed to years ago. Even the payment for, this was a fact of life. But Netanyahu decided to make it an issue to bash the Palestinians. The American administrations picked it up and decided, and Congress, of course, we have to comply with Israeli wishes. So it's a difficult situation right now, and not a single American administration has been fair to the Palestinians at all. All of them brought strategic alliance to Israel, with Israel, to bear on their relationships with us.
Let me ask you about the elections. Now, many Palestinians and many progressives around the world are conflicted with the concept of elections under military occupation. But nonetheless, I mean, how do you see the elections? How do you see them taking place? How are they likely to, and then we'll go into the details of Jerusalem and so on. But how do you see it as a concept? Is it something that can get the Palestinians out of, let's say, the logjam they're in? Does it help in reconciliation and so on?
Well, it's a really historical irony in the sense that we are claiming we want to have free and fair elections under occupation.
Right.
We know there is no such thing. Israel affects and taints everything under occupation, everything we do. Our political system, our freedom of movement, our lives, our homes, everything. So it will taint and it will have an impact on elections, as it did before. I mean, we had free and fair elections in the sense that we prevented any kind of Palestinian intervention or Palestinian manipulation or fraud, but we couldn't prevent Israeli intervention. And as you know, they intervened every time.
Yes.
When I ran for Jerusalem, you know the story where I was stopped and beaten up and they took away all my electoral. And I wasn't allowed to even talk to my own electorate, my own constituents. So they do that all the time. They set up checkpoints, not just in Jerusalem and around Jerusalem, but everywhere. They have army everywhere. They try to intimidate people. They arrest people at the polling stations. They had the border guards and security forces in Jerusalem. So even the young people who wanted to go and vote were scared, because why should they get picked up or arrested when you see such a massive presence of Israeli security forces? So anyway, the Israelis always interfere. And to us, elections are a way of resistance, are a way of defiance, of telling the Israelis, this is our land, and we are here, and we will carry out our own political and democratic moves at will, not under your at your command or whatever. So that is important on the one hand. On the other, there's another irony in the sense that we all, and most people, and the PNC decided that the interim agreements are no longer operative. Remember?
Yes.
And we said that, yes, they do no longer apply. The interim phase is over, and the agreements that govern this interim phase are no longer applicable because Israel violated all of them. And the interim phase should have ended in 1999 anyway, but it became a permanent state of affairs, and Israel picks and chooses in a very selective way what it wants, what it complies with and what it doesn't. It hasn't complied with any of them, and it has violated international law. And yet, the elections are being carried out under the agreements. And that's a real irony, that's a real dilemma. Because we said the agreements are over, excuse me, and we said we are no longer bound by them, including security coordination, etc. And then Israel, and then there's an announcement, there's a decree saying we will have agreements as per the electoral law of 2007, and before that 2003, and so on. And the issue is that all factions rushed to participate in these elections, including Hamas, including the Popular Front, including all the factions who even rejected the so-called the Oslo agreements or all the interim phase agreements, with the exception of Islamic Jihad. So everybody is taking, we have 36 slates, electoral lists, yes. And we have 1,391 candidates.
Are you running, by the way? Are you running?
No, thank you.
You're not. Okay.
Time for other.
You're done. Okay. Yeah.
I'm done taking office.
Right.
But
That's what I mean, of course.
A troublemaker, and I'm not done serving Palestine.
Right. That is true. Yeah. Well, good. Yeah.
So that's the thing. We have 405 women. We have a majority actually of young people in the lists. I was looking at them. If you want to know, between the ages of 28 and 40, we have 39%. Between the ages and 41 to 50, between the ages of 41 to 50, we have 22%. 51 to 60, 22, and over 60, only 17%.
Wow.
Given the fact that our officials, the leadership with official positions, are all within the 5%, and they have all the positions.
Right.
So that's why I said, let's practice what we preach. Let's get younger people. Let's get more women. And I promised I would empower and I would work with women and young people, and I would even campaign for them, which is what I'm doing. I have several meetings with younger people, independents, women from all factions, by the way, in order to ensure that the women can and are able to understand the requirements of elections and of office, and how not to be intimidated, and how to be aware of the ways in which this male system that we have tries to disarm them or silence them or exclude them. So it takes a lot of work, and people are excited, regardless of whether they agree, disagree with the agreements. They want to have elections because they are being governed by a system that they no longer, I don't want to say trust, but they do not believe in the system. They want to see a change in the leadership. The whole system has atrophied, not just the people, but the system. And you have to rejuvenate and re-energize and re-legitimize the political system. And a constant statement by all parties is we want to see change. We want to see change, we want to see reform, we want to be part of decision making, we want to take matters into our own hands. This is the sense of empowerment that the Palestinians feel, given the fact that they feel that they've been disempowered for all these years, when we didn't have elections and where the leadership remained the same old faces, the same old people, the same old way. And when you are in position, as you know, for such a long time, not only do you take things for granted, but you start acting with a sense of entitlement, with privilege, with your benefits, and you begin to feel that you have the right to all these things. And in many ways, there has been an erosion of fundamental rights and freedoms. Within Palestinian society, we are seeing lots of decrees coming out. We have seen the collapse of the legislative process and even the judicial process, with the executive process under one presidential power or control. And the Palestinian people are not happy with that, under occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, actually. That's why you see this energy, even among those who disagree, who do not want to be part of the agreements, and yet they are running under the agreements.
So let me ask you, before we go about the likelihood of postponing or keeping the election and so on, I wanted to ask you if you feel, what you feel or how you feel about the election as a mean to consolidate national unity, or is it something that is likely to entrench divisions and differences and so on? Yeah.
It depends on how it's carried out.
Right.
Definitely the better scenario, the better solution would have been to have agreements before the decree announcing elections.
Yeah. Yes.
Because then you would have a common vision.
Right.
Then you would have an approach to elections, not just as a means of sharing, of divvying up the spoils, but as a means really of consolidating a national agenda that you have worked on. People would have preferred to have seen not necessarily reconciliation on everything, but at least some kind of coming together and agreements on basic issues. They didn't happen. But there was an agreement on the fact of the elections itself, rather than on the meaning, on the agenda, on the political platforms, on what happens afterward. All the factions agreed that there would be a new national unity government, whatever. Now, the problem would be if they run together on one list. At one point, Fatah and Hamas discussed the fact that they wanted to run on as one in one list, and that which meant that they would come to terms, they would agree as to the sharing of the seats, how many seats each faction gets, and which is tantamount to elections by default, because you are uniting the two big movements or parties, probably along with a few of the smaller ones that don't have much of a constituency. And then whom are you running against?
Yeah.
Unless you are running against independents and civil society people and all the reformers and people who, this is not an election. Yeah. This is a sharing of the spoils, maintaining the division by Fatah and Hamas. And in many ways, it bodes ill for the future, because it meant that Hamas will stay in Gaza, controlling Gaza, and Fatah will stay in the West Bank, controlling the West Bank, rather than this real jolt that the political system needs to see that there are people who want to change this, who want to change the configuration of the PLC, and want to see different people, different faces, different currents, different even parties, if you will, because this atrophied system is no longer capable of facing all the challenges, even in its decision-making, in its functional approach, and its administrative approach, in delivering services and everything, even in addressing the rest of the world. So that's the thing. Now, elections are seen now, after the fact, as a way of beginning the process of reconciliation. In the same way as I describe them as beginning the process of change, but they are not themselves the change, because there are so many factors now that have to be addressed. However, the real question, and you hinted at that, is whether there will be elections or not.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. You know, our chairman, Dr. Subhi Ali, of course, the chairman of the
he's an old friend. Of course, I know.
He basically raised a lot of issues that are in every Palestinian mind. And one of them, how do you feel about the election? Are they going to be held, or are they going to be postponed? If they are postponed, what is the fallout of postponing the elections?
Yeah, exactly. That's the real question.
Mm-hmm.
And we're beginning to hear more and more of a tendency towards postponement.
Yeah.
And people are quite upset, because they don't want to see a postponement. The way that the postponement will be presented is by saying we're postponing because of Jerusalem. Yeah, Jerusalem is the issue. And those who say, let's not postpone, let's go on, they will accuse them of playing into the hands of Israel and accepting the American plan and accepting Israel's control over Jerusalem and so on. Those who don't want to see postponement say, no, Jerusalem is a battlefield. Jerusalem is an area of confrontation. Jerusalem is where we have to assert our will and our right to hold elections. It's a Palestinian city. We should go there. We should find ways. There were many suggestions whether we should put ballot boxes in many different places, so that the Israelis will have to go everywhere to try to block elections, or that we should go to the UN and say, well, Jerusalem is still corpus separatum, East and West Jerusalem. So let's put them in the UN and let people elect there. Some people said electronically, but others don't like it because they want to be there physically. So you have to find different ways of holding elections and different ways of defying Israel. They say we shouldn't give Israel the veto right, in the sense that they say no elections in Jerusalem. We say, okay, there are no elections at all. No, how do we show the world that we want elections in Jerusalem? The Europeans, for example, for months, if not years, they were telling us, all you need to do is sign issue the decree, tell the president, issue the decree, so you can have elections, because without elections, your democratic legitimacy is in trouble, it's in question. And so the president issued the decree suddenly, this surprised almost everybody. And the Europeans are saying we cannot do anything. But you said you will not address the Jerusalem issue or put pressure on Israel or threaten sanctions or anything unless the decree is issued. Then you have something in your hand to go and use with the Israelis. And you know how many countries asked to send observers? One
country.
One country, the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, you should say that we have this list, these people coming as observers, and these coming as supporters or in order to do some awareness raising and so on, and educational courses, whatever. Instead, the decree was issued, they sat back and they watched as the Palestinians started demanding elections in Jerusalem and started facing the Israeli forces and started struggling to be able to have it. And there was very little movement. And then there was a commission, an elections commission that wanted to come from the EU, and the Israelis wouldn't let them come. So what are they doing? They're having meetings with us from outside, online, long distance, virtual. So that's the problem, is that you keep getting promises and they keep saying they will intervene and they will put pressure and they will engage and Jerusalem has to be, and they agree. And there are agreements about the way in which the elections can be held in Jerusalem. I ran twice in the two, as you know, in the two elections we had, and twice I ran in Jerusalem and I went to Jerusalem. It was a battle every time. It was confrontations. But we do need to have observers. We do need to have as many as possible. Now they're saying, well, the people who are already in the area can be observers. This is ridiculous. They have handfuls of people, and they can.
Well, you know why? Because I don't think there's any enthusiasm for the election. Certainly not down the road at Foggy Bottom, because they feel that they say it in the corridors. They say that Hamas will win the election. The Fatah is divided and broken. The leadership is, unable to meet the challenge and so on. That's why they don't want the elections. I mean, they probably are behind the scene pushing the Palestinian Authority president to take a decision against the election. What is your take?
Possibly. Of course, they don't say this outright. Right. And everybody says they want elections, and everybody says, like the Americans said, elections are a Palestinian internal issue and not interfere. What do you mean internal issue? Israel is an external power that is distorting and preventing elections. It is not Palestinian elections are an international issue, really. Right. So you cannot say it's internal when you allow Israel to do all these things and prevent us from having elections, and then you say, no, it's not. You have to curb Israeli violations. You have to step in and step up and say, that's it, that's enough. But they don't anyway. So yes, we did hear, of course, there were leaks and there were hints and saying, it's like 2006.
Right.
Elections are fine, provided you elect the people we want.
Right.
And if you elect the people we don't like, then we will impose sanctions on you. Which is what they did. Yes. And we said this is hypocritical. Israel, all these years, has been violating international law, international humanitarian law, human rights, as an occupying power, has been acting with absolute ruthless lawlessness, and yet you never imposed sanctions on Israel. The moment we elected people, a party that you don't like, you impose sanctions on the Palestinians. It was incredible, and it sent a message to the Palestinian people that democracy is fine provided you elect the people we like or the people we want. Otherwise, we will punish you for exercising your democratic right. Now they're doing the same thing obliquely, you know?
Yeah.
If you cannot guarantee the outcome, if you cannot guarantee a majority of non-Hamas people or whatever, then don't hold elections.
Yeah.
Nobody
Okay.
can guarantee
Yeah.
anything.
Suppose the election is held. How is that likely to help bolster or augment or buttress whatever the PLO is doing? How is that likely to impact the PLO, positively or negatively?
Look, the elections at the beginning are only for the PLC.
Right.
And they are only for the people.
That is the question. I mean, this is the question, since it is, for the.
And then you have presidential elections for what? For the president of the PA. And we said that these are all interim agreements. Now, the PLO is the only body that is permanent, not interim, that it was not formed as a result of agreements with Israel, and that should not be and is not subject to the occupation, because the PLO represents all Palestinians everywhere, and that's how it should be. It has been weakened, and it has been deliberately sidelined. It's one reason why I resigned. I mean, gradually the PLO became more of an observer, more of a, what I would say, a consultancy, and playing a consultancy role. Not taking decisions, and even when its bodies like the parliamentary bodies PNC and PCC take decisions, they are not listened to, they are not implemented.
Can I ask you on this very point that you just mentioned? Sorry to interrupt, but do you think that you were late in resigning? Perhaps, when you saw it, when you saw the PLO, morph into what it was, like more of an observer, as you termed it. Was it a mistake to wait that long?
To wait that long? Well, I've been
to
trying
resign,
to
because you mentioned you're resigning. I'm asking you flat out. Yeah.
Said, it's not easy to resign from this position. Nobody resigns.
Yes.
I've been trying to resign for years. You should know this. I've been trying to leave. No, I ran for elections because as a result of the women's mutiny, you know that, for the executive committee, because it's the women who decided not to obey their own factional leaders' decisions, and this whole formation of an all-male executive committee. And they said, no, we want elections and we will submit Hanan's name on our behalf. So they voted for me in order to have a woman there, and I couldn't say no. So that's why I joined. And I know to us, the PLO was, really something larger than life. But then gradually I saw how it was becoming. And I thought I could make a difference from within, as you know, from within the system. I could make a difference. I could work. I could try to energize. I could get my colleagues and people I was working with. It became more and more and more difficult. And in 2018, 2017, I told the president, please don't mention my name. I don't want to run again. I don't want to be part of this. And I will not be a sort of symbolic token woman or a token progressive presence in an institution that is being undermined completely. And then there was all sorts of pressure from everybody, not just from the president, from Fatah, from all the different factions. I'm an independent, as you know. So I said, I'm an independent. Nobody can tell me what to do. I don't depend on you. I've never asked for a position from you. I never asked for any privilege or any money from you. I'm my own person. So please let me walk away. And they wouldn't. They presented my name and they put it on the list, and I couldn't say no. Finally, for 2 years, since 2018, they promised that I would be able to leave within a few months because they will have a meeting of the Central Council and then I can leave. Unfortunately, every meeting of the Central Council, there's an emergency, there's a difficult situation, they will accuse you of walking away. So I waited until the end of the Trump era. I said by the end of 2020, you cannot say you abandoned the ship or you let us down or you whatever. And I didn't want to start a battle, frankly speaking. So I went and I talked to the president and I said, let's agree by the end of the year, I want to leave and I will write you my resignation. And I gave him all the reasons why I think that this political system needs to change and why we need young men and women and why we need to change our whole approach to democratic rights and freedoms and how we need to empower the PLO. That is absolutely crucial. So, and he said, okay. And I said, I won't announce it. Let me say this because people have to understand.
Sure.
And I said, I will announce it only when we agree, you and I, to announce it together so it wouldn't create a problem. And there were people around the president who, I mean, they didn't know, nobody knew. Until a week later, 10 days later, the early December, they started, the president was asking people if they can convince me to stay, not to resign. And so that's how they found out. And they started asking me, and I said, no, I'm adamant. I'm not going to announce it because I promised the president I wouldn't announce it until we do it, both of us. For 4 whole days, they filled the space with lies and smears, bots and trolls everywhere. Facebook was filled with lies that I wanted a position or I wanted privilege or I was too sick to work or they even went to the Israelis, to Israeli writers who with connections to the Mossad. They went to the diplomatic corps. They filled Facebook with all sorts of stupid lies. Everybody knows I never wanted a position. I don't want one. And had I wanted negotiations, I would have had that office in '94. Why now, when I refused it? So anyway, that was the thing. As I told you, it's not easy to resign from the system. They do not accept the fact that somebody can say, I'm independent and I can walk away, especially if it's a woman. It's not easy.
Are you being harassed for resigning?
I was for a long, but now no more because they have others that they're harassing because now they have to attack Nasser Qudwe and Dahlan and others who are running. So I said, at least these elections came to end the campaign against me. And all I did was just walk away. So that's it. Suppose you start defying the way these people are doing. There are many people from Fatah who are defying their own party. And that's why the elections are seen as a way in which Fatah would divide itself, so to speak, and would fragment. But it's very difficult. And our political system is extremely unforgiving because after all these years, they've become, as I said, so solidified in their control and entitled and with a sense of permanence.
Right. Yes, sense of permanence. Yeah. So generally, Dr. Hanan, the election in principle would be a good thing for Palestinian women. You mentioned 405 candidates, which is quite a few. I mean, maybe a dozen or more than a dozen, or maybe 20 can get elected, right?
It would be more than 30.
More than 30 would be
affirmative action.
And that would represent the whole, spectrum, the whole political spectrum, or are they Fatah and Hamas?
Well, according to the law, you have to have, generally the PNC said 30% minimum.
Yeah.
The new electoral law that was amended by the president said 26%. So we don't know what happened to the 4%. And then we said to be represented not just as candidates, but we want them in positions where they can be elected. So in the first 3, you have to have at least 1 woman. And in the second 3 or 4, you have to have another. So what did they do? Many of the lists put a man, and a woman. So if you get 2 seats, you end up with 2 men. Then they said 3 men and a woman. So if you get 5 seats, you get 1 woman.
I see.
And then if you get 8 seats afterwards, you get 2 women. So it's no longer the 30%. To get into the PLC, You see what I mean?
Yes.
If you put 26% on your list, or even 30 or more, there are some who have they have 33, some have 40, 43.7, 43.75. There are some lists of the younger lists who have more women than others, but it doesn't mean that they can pass the threshold, okay? Because they're small, they're new, and they're entering this as a way of putting themselves on the political map. And most of them know that they might not get a single seat. And even the small factions will sort of disappear. They will not be able to pass the threshold of the minimum.
So all Palestinian political entities and parties are in the election except for Al-Jihad, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Jihad, Islamic Jihad.
They have never participated in the elections.
What are the prospects for someone like Marwan Barghouti, who is in prison? What are the prospects of him? Yeah, I guess he's running for the legislative council, as well as he might run for president, right?
Yeah, he's not running personally for the legislative council.
Right.
Fadwa and the Marwan, what we call the Marwan group, are running along with the Muntaqa al-Watan al-Demokrati, which is the Nasser al-Qudwa group.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the Muntaqa al-Watan al-Demokrati, along with the Marwan group, together formed a list called Al-Hurriya.
Yes.
Al-Hurriya. Now, Marwan didn't want to be in the legislative elections because he wants to run for presidential elections. And they tried to dissuade him from doing that. And they tried to ask him to run with Fatah, and they will give him, all sorts of, internal agreements and deals and so on. But
title while in prison.
Now, if you look at public opinion polls, and we have quite a few with differing results, amazingly, they're not all consistent. One thing they're consistent about is that Marwan is the person who will have the largest number of votes for president, larger than Abu Mazen, larger than Ismail Haniyeh or anybody else. That if he runs a three-way race, he will get the majority vote. A two-way race, he will get the majority vote, and so on. Because Marwan is seen as an activist, a person who struggled hard all his life, a person who spent all these years, that people are presenting him as Mandela Palestine and so on. And yet people who has political astuteness. So he's not just a mindless activist, as some people said, all he does. No, I've known him very well. He was our student, after all, in one of these periods when he wasn't in jail. And he was in the student council and so on. So before he was deported. So he's somebody, and he was engaged in the political scene for a long time. The thing is, he has credibility and he has a following, and the people see him as somebody who unites people, who can talk to all factions. So that's important. And then you have them joining forces with Nasser, and Nasser is seen as somebody who knows the world, somebody who has international connections. Yes. Not just the symbolic value of being the nephew of Yasser Arafat, who is
the UN.
Loved. Yes, Yasser Arafat now is a memory that is persistent, that is there. Everybody talks about Yasser Arafat and so on, and compares what happened to us with the days of Arafat. But still, and Nasser is supported by civil society in many ways, and by the intellectuals and academics and so on. So it's a very interesting combination. I attended some of their meetings, and there's an appeal there in the sense that if you have people who know the world, people who are not tainted also by corruption. Remember, both Nasser and Marwan are not tainted by corruption.
Right.
So that's important because people are fed up with any type of corruption. And then you have Dahlan has been there all along. I mean, he's not a new discovery. I don't know why they're surprised that he has a list of his own. He's been saying this for a long time. Yeah, for years he's been presented as public enemy number one, and yet he's been there and he's been working and
does he have a base? Does he have a large popular base?
According to the polls, and I tell you, the polls are a movable feast.
Yeah, I see.
According to the polls, he might get 8%,
Okay.
if not more.
Yeah.
We don't know. But he does have a base, particularly in Gaza and in Jerusalem, because that's where he was able to work. And he brought in a lot of support and funding and even vaccinations to Gaza. So people look at him that way through his connections. And he does have a solid base of people who were with him within Fatah.
Yeah.
So
Let me
you
just
have
make
that. But
make
it's not in the West Bank, according to the polls anyway.
Just make a notification now. We're getting a lot of questions. Some of them, the questions I'm asking are not all mine. So I'm getting some of the questions that been sent to us. I just want everybody to know that. I'm not stating verbatim, but in essence, there's so much to talk about. We are at the 1 hour mark. We want to go a bit longer because there are so many other things that I want to ask you about. You mentioned COVID, which is really a huge thing and a huge problem in Palestine. And there's a great deal, there's so much misinformation. The Israelis claim that they have inoculated 100,000 Palestinians. They vaccinated 100,000 Palestinians, those who work, I guess, in Israel or the settlements and so on. There's a great deal of confusion. There seems to be inability to distribute the vaccine. So if you can share with us what is going on with the battle to fight COVID, and then we will go back to some of the other issues we discussed.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very tough battle. It's a very tough battle. And I want to say from the beginning, I know the Minister of Health, Michaeli, she works day and night, and she's a totally dedicated human being, but she's working against tremendous odds. Now, getting the vaccine itself is a battle.
Yeah.
Now, they got some from COVAX, the international.
Yeah, that's the international body.
But it is only, I don't know how many, 100,000, 200,000, which is not enough.
Yeah.
Something like that. Then they tried to buy some with whatever funds they have. And they are cash-strapped anyway, they don't have much money. And even those that they tried to buy was delayed. And they couldn't get them because of all sorts of shipments and so on. So they did manage by a variety of means to get some. There was a big campaign that they were given to people who were in positions of power or close either to the executive committee or to the president or to the, So that was a big attack. Yeah. Now, I cannot verify this or not, frankly speaking. But this was from some of civil society organizations, anti-corruption groups, including Hanan, were saying we need to see where the vaccines went. Now, wherever they weren't enough for the Palestinian population as a whole. Some vaccines went to Gaza directly. Yeah, they didn't come to the West Bank. And now they're almost out of vaccines. They're even out of tests. COVID test. The situation is very, very drastic. We have 50,000 cases. We have 3,200 and some deaths. And given our population, that's a very large percentage. And our hospitals are unable to cope, frankly. We don't have enough of the machines, the respiratory systems. We don't have enough ICUs. So it's all a major disaster. And yet people go around behaving as though all is normal. Everything is fine. I can't believe that.
No masks.
It's just another hurdle that we have to go through. You rarely see people with masks or people distancing.
Social distancing.
Social distancing. It's incredible. And we haven't had enough help or support, frankly. A couple of days ago, Mohammed Shtayyeh announced that they're buying for, I don't know how many $1 million. I don't know where they borrowed that money from, but to buy some more vaccines. They got some vaccines from China. They got some from Russia. And they got
from England, from Oxford, AstraZeneca.
Now, AstraZeneca, many people don't want to take it.
Right.
After they read all these things about it,
Right.
they're not willing to take it. So I know many people who said they will not. They have a website, they have a place on which you can register and go. It's not that they're not organized, they are organized. But the thing is, it depends on availability. Everything depends on availability.
Right. Yeah, so the AstraZeneca is not taken seriously because of what has happened.
Because of what they read, that
Right.
it wasn't being,
Right.
accepted by other places. So they're not taking it and they're afraid of it. Many people, they go to get the vaccine. If it's AstraZeneca, they come back. They say, we don't want to.
Dr. Hanan, let me ask you, and it is really a question that I wanted to ask you back in January or December, at the 33rd anniversary of the Intifada, and you were right in the forefront of the Intifada. You were there all along.
Mhm.
Why? I mean, with the exceptions, of course, of what we saw in Jerusalem, which is an amazing thing. The people, their willingness to go out and sacrifice and so on. But it seems that the ability of the Palestinians, to go out and conduct a sustained intifada has been, sort of diminished.
Yeah.
What is your explanation for that?
An intifada is not, in a sense, a way of life. I see it as a constant.
Right.
And then you have ups and downs. And then you have peaks and then you have periods. It's not like you can live your life engaged in battle side.
Yeah.
An intifada is a very demanding and taxing and dangerous move. It's not that easy. But I've always said that the Palestinians live in a constant state of intifadas in different ways. If you boycott, you are engaged in resistance, intifada. If you refuse cooperation with the Israelis, it's another. If you go out and demonstrate, if you go out and help, if you plant trees where they uproot them, if you go defend people who are threatened, if you stand with people whose houses are being threatened or demolished, even if you launch campaigns, information campaigns, public diplomacy, and so on, this is part of it. It's in a constant state, not just of defense, but in a constant state of defying what's happening and at the same time trying to tell the world what's happening and trying to maintain some sort of ability for the Palestinian people to stay in the land, to be resilient, to be able to. You cannot have a situation where people are leaving or where people are having a hard time feeding their kids and so on, and then they say they're going to be in a constant state of intifada. You remember the first intifada? People were economically well off.
Yeah.
It was economically the best period for the Palestinians,
That's
and
amazing.
yet they rebelled because we wanted freedom.
Right.
And because we wanted to get rid of this occupation, and because we sent a clear message to the army, to the Israeli occupation, that we, unarmed men, women, and children, were out there defying the army, building barricades, engaging with them physically. We were beaten up, we were shot at, we were imprisoned, we were detained. It didn't matter. We had to do this.
Right.
That was a period. That was one type of intifada. But then, as I said, it takes on different shapes, different forms, depending, again, on the situation and the context. In Jerusalem, you had two intifadas. This is the second one. Before that, it was the electronic fences. But if you in Aleen and Bilain and so on, this was a state of constant intifadas in different places.
Yes.
And at the same time, now we are fragmented. We have checkpoints. It's not like you could mobilize thousands of people to go to one place. So you are stopped at different checkpoints and you cannot get through. So only it becomes a localized intifada. You have to go where the army is. Before, you would open your door and go outside and there's the army. You could fight with the army all the time. But now you have to go where the army is stationed. And it is stationed at the entrances and exits of each town and village and so on. So you end up only with the local groups, with local resistance, going to face the army on the grounds that the army chooses. Unlike before, where we would engage with them where we chose. I remember we used to go to the hilltops. We used to go up the street and build barricades there. And so the army would come after us, they would have to climb up the hill, and we would throw stones at them. They would throw tear gas. So it was different. So you cannot replicate every intifada the way it was. What you need to do is have the spirit of intifada, expressing itself in a variety of ways that are most appropriate to the conditions. And the second intifada was totally different again.
Is this disconnect between the leadership or the body, the political structures that you termed as atrophied and in many ways they are calcified and so on? This disconnect also does not help to create a sustained intifada or sustained resistance by the Palestinians.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. You have a confidence gap. You have a gap between the people and the leadership. Mm-hmm. That's true. And you have a leadership that has, in many ways, that does not take risks. Before, the definition of leadership was different. You had underground leadership. Right. You had leadership who were willing to take risks and pay the price, not leaderships who want, cars and entourage and special privileges. The whole concept of who's a leader in days of rebellion and intifada is quite different from who's a leader when you have set up a system of power and benefits and privilege. And add to that the fact that it is, on the whole, I don't want to keep bashing the leaders, but it is largely dysfunctional in many ways, particularly given the nature of the challenges that we face, that people lost confidence. And they keep saying, well, I want to see your kids go out to the checkpoint and face the army and get tear gassed and get shot at and so on. You cannot just tell me go and demonstrate. And by definition, the Palestinian people are extremely spontaneous when it comes to resistance. They are not push-button people. They do not respond to orders. Nobody can tell you, now go out and demonstrate, or now there's an intifada. They don't do that. And that's why
they had it up to here. Huh? Yes,
yeah. So people come out when they feel that, and the first intifada was entirely spontaneous. Right. Entirely. And that's what gave it such a tremendous force, where the whole population was out there. But now you cannot have a whole population go out. Mm-hmm. However, you see every night now, since the beginning of the Jerusalem confrontations, you see daily confrontations with the army in every town, in every place. So we have what we call invisible intifadas because they're not covered, because you don't have the press, because nobody reports, and because the injured are taken to hospitals, nobody sees them, and so on. But this is happening all the time, and there are different areas that have never stopped facing the Israelis with confrontations. So I cannot say that the Palestinian people do not have an ongoing intifada. I cannot say that they stopped. On the contrary, and they're paying a very heavy price, because there's disruption in life, there's loss of life, the dangers that they're subjected to, and so on. And it's not an easy thing to sustain. And yet they have maintained the spirit and the will not to succumb, to resist. At least if they don't want to actively resist, they will not submit their will to the Israelis. And that's an important aspect.
We've gone on for 1 hour and 15 minutes, but I want to ask you to look, to look into the crystal ball, if you will. Will we have election or no election? And second, what ought to be the priorities before the Palestinian people, the 3 or 4 priorities that we should have, let's say, in the short term?
Look, it's extremely doubtful. I cannot tell you definitely that we won't have it, and I can't tell you definitely that we will. But I think it's doubtful it's extremely doubtful that we will have elections. Israel is doing everything possible to send a message that Jerusalem is off limits. They have arrested people, they continue to arrest. They have disrupted meetings, they continue. You cannot even hold a meeting, you cannot walk down the street if you're a candidate to announce who you are or whatever. So they've arrested the candidates, they've closed down meetings, they've disrupted they've prevented press conferences, any meetings with constituencies, and they're going to continue to do that. They are doing that. They have the means of preventing any kind of activity, elections related activity in Jerusalem. That's one thing. And while they're not going to give you an answer, to me, it's ironic that we went and asked for permission and they haven't answered. Why are you waiting for permission? I mean, even if you want to go by the agreements, you have an agreement about the nature of elections in Jerusalem. Go ahead and start working and bring these timid Europeans and Americans and whoever to come and say, okay, abide by the agreement. There were elections in Jerusalem before, however difficult and unfair, but you should pursue them. Anyway, so from what I hear, and from public opinion polls, and from the fact that many people within and outside are not happy with the projections of the outcome, that they might find ways of, justifying it by saying we can't have elections without Jerusalem. And if you say no, we should be able to have elections, then they will tell you, why are you willing to give up Jerusalem? Where nobody, not a single Palestinian wants to give up Jerusalem or is willing to do that. But you have to be able to defy, as we said, you have to be able to find alternative ways and not to enable Israel to impose its will that way. And given the fact that the international community that promised so much delivered almost nothing, it's very hard to see how you can have elections. And hearing and reading all these statements that are coming out, when you hear a statement that says no elections without Jerusalem, the first impact is no election. When you say we will have elections and Jerusalem is at the heart of our elections, that's a different message, okay? And I'm hearing more, no elections without Jerusalem, no elections unless, and we haven't heard from the Israelis. Why wait for to hear from the Israelis anyway? And the meetings that were held, suddenly the executive committee met after months of inaction. The central committee of Fatah met twice. And there will be a meeting in the next couple of days of the leadership, which is the executive committee with the Central Council of Fatah, with the heads of security services, with the people working with the president and so on. There will be a leadership, when a leadership meeting with the heads of different factions, when they all meet, it means that somebody wants to take a decision and that they all will be part of that decision.
Yeah.
So
of course, it could be just, the Jerusalem issue may be just a convenient excuse not to hold the elections, because elections were held. There are mechanisms to have Jerusalemites participate, correct?
Yes, there are, but people want them to participate in the city itself, not outside the city. There are polling stations within, particularly the old city. This is the problem. No, and we did have elections before twice. So we should insist on doing it the same way.
Before we go into your final remarks,
And I have to leave, yes, because I have another webinar.
Very quickly, I have a question from one of our colleagues on what are the chances of getting division of power within the Palestinian political system? I assume, between, let's say, Fatah and Hamas.
It depends on how. If you have reconciliation, if you have a democratic system, there should be power sharing. Division of power is sharing the spoils. That's not what we want. We want to be able to have an inclusive democratic system that has room for everybody. And we were hoping, all of us, that these elections would, in a way, open the door for this kind of inclusive diversity, of having everybody participate, of breaking the control, of breaking the monopoly over power of the two big parties, of making room for younger people, for people who can deal with the rest of the world, for people who can combine political action with the activism and so on. It's very difficult. So if we don't have elections, it's going to be extremely difficult. But if you have elections as a result of a deal among different factions, then this is a de facto outcome. It is not an election, and it will not be accepted by the people. They want to elect. People want to exercise their right. to choose, to hold their leadership accountable, and to give a vote of confidence or no confidence, and to elect new people. They want to do that. And you can't deprive them of that right. And everybody is, I can tell you with no exception, particularly among the independents and so on, and civil society, they want to see inclusivity, inclusion, not just women, but different political tendencies and currents and parties, and even new parties and youth and so on. There are quite a few youthful organizations that are participating. So without elections, it would be very difficult to have power sharing, in the sense that you have a basis for this power sharing. And what power? I mean, what is the power that any leader has?
Yeah.
There's no power, really.
Not under occupation.
No, I think we should go back to the concept of service only, that you are there to serve the people, that you take risks on behalf of the people, that you are willing to pay the price, the way we were. And nobody said we are leaders. We were, part of an intifada, and we were working in order to ensure that people had their rights, that students could go to alternative schools, that we could support people who were in economic straits. We could, that is, and that you could go out and protest. This is what we mean by real power. Now, it's difficult. I mean, power which comes to you as a result of an office, and you exercise it only on your own people, this is not power, frankly.
Well, with those profound words, Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, I want to thank you very much for this conversation. That can go on for hours. I have so many other questions. I mean, we could go on and on, but we have to at one point. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been enlightening. It's explained great many things that are, on the minds of most Palestinians. That's for sure.
Saeed, I have to mention this before you.
Please.
You asked me questions, but I always waited for your questions when you questioned the spokespersons of the State Department and the secretaries of state, because we always knew this was Saeed asking, and we always looked for your questions. So you always have intelligent and probing questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to do my job. Okay. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll get together again, via Zoom, or better yet, when you come to visit to the United States.
Right. I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hanan. Thank you so much. We hope to have you again. Thanks for a great discussion, especially coming from your perspective. We really appreciate it. And again, we look forward to having you again, Dr. Ashrawi. Thank you.
Thank you. Promise to do that again.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Take care. Love to all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.